Everyone doesn't melt. So we'll get started and I will try to speak as quickly as I can. Thank you all for joining me on this important day. I first want to say thank you to Senator Cardin for his leadership on this issue and for my fellow co-leads in the House, Ranking Member Raskin, Congresswoman Fushi, as well as Congressman Carter. I'd also like to thank the Voting Rights Restoration Working Group, the Reentry Working Group, and Daniel's Initiative for their work to change the hearts and minds on this issue. I'm also so grateful to have Brittany Lovely here today to tell her story, her very real story, of the difficulties of navigating patchwork legislation. As a Texan, I've seen how our great governor, and please understand that there is shade in that statement, how our great governor, Greg Abbott, has criminalized voting. On June 30th, my governor signed House Bill 1243, which would increase criminal penalties for the offense of illegal voting from a misdemeanor to a felony. Now, to give a little bit of a background on this is an issue that we actually reduced last session when I was serving in the Texas House. And that was because of a woman by the name of Crystal Mason, which some of you may know. In 2016, Crystal Mason cast a provisional ballot in the state of Texas. And for those of you that don't know how a provisional ballot works in our state, basically her ballot was never counted. It was officially never really even cast. But Crystal didn't know that as a returning citizen on parole-ish, and I say it that way because she wasn't really on parole, Crystal Mason had been convicted in the federal system and she was released. And so that release was not considered parole because we don't really do federal parole. She was just on federal release. Well, the Texas law says if you are on parole or probation, then you can't cast a ballot. Well, she technically wasn't on either one of them, and that's why this bill matters so much. But this was someone who felt like she should participate in the process and thought that she had every right to participate in the process. She made a mistake that unfortunately we're going to see other people make because the laws are all over the place. And that's why we want one standard that we are offering in the DRA. Unfortunately, this mistake is supposed to cost her 5 years in prison. That's what she was sentenced to. Now, this has been up on appeal, it's been debated, and one of the reasons that we bettered this law last session was specifically because of Crystal Mason, because she did not know and she was not intending to break the law, and it was confusing. Now, I'll say now what I said as a private citizen testifying back in 2019 on this issue. When state governments create confusion about the voting laws and prosecute innocent mistakes to the fullest extent possible, people just don't risk it. It's yet another way to make sure that voter suppression is real in this country. These policies are disenfranchising voters, both in law and in practice. Republicans in Texas want to reinstate these penalties next year, criminalizing voters who cast their vote without knowing that they're ineligible. We've already seen this in Florida, where dozens of returning citizens believing their rights have been restored and after being able to register to vote by Florida government officials were arrested by Governor DeSantis for the crime of illegal voting. The majority of these cases have been thrown out and others are unlikely to stand up in court, but the damage is all American voters, especially black and brown voters, are getting the message that just casting a vote could land them in jail. Voting restrictions impact everyone. In 2022, over 4.5 million U.S. citizens, or about 1 in 50 adults, could not vote as a result of a felony conviction. However, we know the criminal justice system has a disproportionate impact on minorities in our society. More than 6% of voting-age black Americans are disenfranchised due to felony convictions. Latinos have been in prison at 2 times the rate of white citizens. Given the actions of the state legislatures in states such as Texas and Florida, our federal government must make this message clear. People who have served their time deserve to have their right to vote restored. Requiring returning citizens to pay fines and fees related to their incarceration sounds a little too familiar to me. It sounds like something like a modern-day poll tax, something that allegedly was only alive and well during Jim Crow. How are formerly incarcerated persons functioning, and productive members of our society if they cannot participate in the most fundamental feature of a true democracy? The answer is they can't. Senator Cardin and I have introduced the Democracy Restoration Act to draw a line in the sand and end the permanent denial of federal voting rights for individuals with criminal convictions who have been released from incarceration regardless of fines, fees, parole, or probation. This bill would be a positive step towards nationwide rights restoration for returning citizens and would galvanize the fight against state voter suppression in states like mine. I want to now bring the great senator up to deliver remarks.
Representative Crockett, first of all, thank you very much for your extraordinary leadership on this critically important issue. The Democracy Restoration Act is all about civil rights and voter integrity and making sure that our system is fair and equitable. Representative Crockett mentioned that 2% of Americans are disqualified from voting today because of the laws of states. But you may have passed over, she said, in certain minority communities, that's 6%. And then if you look at which states have it, it's even a higher percentage in many states of minority populations that have been disqualified from